Afraid? Batman's not afraid of anything. It's me. I'm afraid. I'm afraid that the Joker may be right about me. Sometimes I question the rationality of my actions, and I'm afraid that when I walk through those asylum gates, when I walk into Arkham and the doors close behind me, it'll be just like coming home. Batman Arkham Asylum begins as it means to go on. The sky flashes and is suddenly filled with the only real symbol of hope Gotham has ever known, while the streets are filled with the chaos and the aftermath of said chaos. The Batmobile roars through the street, through the concrete jungle like a panther chasing its prey to its inevitable end. The Joker, beaten, rides shotgun in the car. Its driver is stoic and as hell-bent on the mission as ever. Signs warn of escaping inmates from their destination, a serious house on a serious earth. A place the worst of the worst go to rot, and our home for the next 8 hours of gameplay. As the Batmobile rushes towards the monolithic main tower of the asylum, we see it. Arkham Asylum is no normal prison for the criminally insane, and the developers knew this. At the time, the unknown studio that was Rocksteady Studios took the idea of Arkham being a character in itself and ran with it. The shot of the island tells you everything you need to know. It almost feels like another world, completely separated from the innocence and conflicting corruption of the city it looms near. Arkham Asylum begins in a way which is deserving of the fanfare it receives, an iconic first scene for an equally as iconic franchise, and one fitting for its titular main character. As the main entrance flashes open to reveal the Dark Knight and his common foil, we get introduced to another one of our main players, Warden Quincy Sharp, a mayoral candidate and warden of the asylum that unknowingly we're now trapped in. Unknowingly to anyone in the building, this night will go down as one of the worst in its history. Warden speaks of his desire to cure the Joker, who just got captured raiding Gotham City Hall and strapping a bomb to the mayor's chest, and he booms that curing the Joker will secure his place as a prime mayoral candidate, and another escape will all but seal his failure to secure Gotham's now vacant mayoral role. The inside of the asylum is as conflicted as the city it hangs onto. The old Gothic brickwork and layout contrasting with the recent futuristic renovations made to it. Beaming spotlight hit the entrance while Batman escorts the Joker into the asylum with 3 guards, among them being Officer Frank Bowles, a loudmouth, morally dubious guard, who seems to have history with the Clown Prince we're bringing back to the asylum. A history we'll later find that isn't as bad as it's cracked up to be. The game opens with its first gameplay section being a slow, methodical walk through the halls of the asylum. The now iconic tannoy system warns us of the new inmate being escorted through intensive treatment, and for good reason. According to Officer North, every available officer and guard has been brought in tonight to finally make sure the Joker stays away for good. But the Joker seems calm, happy to be back, and even comments on the extra security, asking the guards how a guy's even supposed to break out of here. He even refers to the asylum as his hacienda, meaning a large estate or home. Joker seems happy to be back, and Batman knows this, hence why he decides to go with the guards while escorting Joker. It would be wrong of me not to mention the music here. Throughout this slow walk through the asylum, a slowed, more haunting version of the main theme plays, and it rumbles on in the background, setting the scene for what's going to be a slow, haunting journey through the night. The composer, Nick Arundel, who'd go on to make music for 2 of Asylum's sequels, captured the feeling of the Asylum in his work. It's dark and it's a slow burn, but behind all of that it's filled with layers of intrigue, and so it was only right that Arundel was nominated at the 2010 BAFTA Game Awards for Best Original Soundtrack. His work in this game is stellar, and he's a huge reason why Asylum has kept its memorable atmospheric feel all these years later. Back on the walk through the asylum, and we go through a security check. The lights go off, but not on the Joker, on Batman. Joker cracks a pun about how Batman has brought batarangs, bat claws and bat snacks, while the guards doing the scan acknowledge that Joker doesn't have any weapons. No laughing gas, not even a knife. As far as weapons go, he has nothing. Which makes the following line, where they're told to not take their guns off the Joker, all that more unnerving. Even strapped to a gurney, with 3 armed guards escorting him with Batman in tow, the security detail of Arkham Asylum still feel the need to keep Joker at the wrong end of an assault rifle at all times. A welcome video plays as we pass Joker's crew down a corridor, who seem all giddy that their boss has arrived. The welcome video, done by Quincy Sharp himself, is calm, kind, and collected. It gives background on the asylum itself and welcomes new patients. Joker remarks that it's one of his favourite TV shows, a clear reminder of just how many times he's been down this corridor before. Joker talks about the state of the asylum itself and the other prison in Gotham, Blackgate, where a recent fire caused all of Joker's incarcerated men to be shifted to Arkham, weeks before the Joker would arrive. He's checked over by a doctor, and he lunges at the doctor, and everyone jumps back, showing how just everyone here is on edge tonight. This isn't just a normal day in the asylum. Everyone's scared, fearful he'll break out, or worse. Over the tannoy, a woman tells us that a Category 9 patient is in transit, and shoot-to-kill permissions have been granted if anything goes awry. Waylon Jones, aka Killer Croc, arrives in intensive treatment. Joker recognises his smell, make of that what you will, and Croc gets out of the elevator, towering over everyone in the room, but fixating specifically on Batman, telling him he has his scent before being escorted further into the asylum, while grumbling on about how he's going to kill Batman in the most gruesome way possible. The escort continues into the elevator Croc just left, as one of the guards asks how Batman even got past security. This is a small throwaway line, but I think the following events might throw that line into some discussions regarding certain guards' loyalty. But alas, Joker, Batman, Officer Bowles and the unnamed guard pulling Joker along head into the elevator and head deeper into the asylum. Joker mentions how it's a great night for a party, before reminding everyone of the fire at Blackgate, all but revealing his plan. Not directly, but the world's greatest detective seems onto him, unsure of Joker's motives. He's never been captured this easily. It's almost like he wanted to be here. A power cut stops the elevator mid-descent, and when the lights come back on, Batman has his hand around Joker's neck as the two guards in the elevator frantically search for a light to be put on Joker. Joker further tells us about this mysterious fire at Blackgate, and says he'll aim to kill at least 100 guards when he escapes this time, in response to Officer Bowles saying he killed 3 of his crew last time he busted out of here. Here we meet Commissioner Jim Gordon, who at this point in his career has an established, I'd go as far to say friendship, with Batman, and the two discuss the night's events thus far, before we cut to a pair of red and blue boots resting on a table, before cutting back to Batman being denied further entry into the asylum, because quote unquote, he could unsettle the more violent inmates. Batman reiterates that Joker surrendered without a fight, and something isn't right here, and the Joker tells Batman not to be a stranger, and he's always welcome back, which I personally took as a direct reference to Grant Morrison's classic Batman story, and a personal favourite, Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious earth, something we'll be talking about a lot in this video, where it said in the opening of the book that Batman one day might almost feel at home in the asylum. He's afraid one day he'll walk through those giant, all-encompassing doors and feel safe, feel at home among the madness the walls breed. This could be a stretch and Joker could just be being Joker here, but I like to think every line of dialogue is said for a reason, and this is a nice little nod to this idea Morrison introduced all those years ago. It's pretty obvious Rocksteady took a huge amount of inspiration from Serious House on Serious Earth, so I think a lot of the core themes of that novel are brought into this game, exploring Batman's psyche through the various villains he faces as the night goes on, and drilling deep into the mind of the Dark Knight, draining him both physically and mentally. Back to the story, and the Joker pretty brutally escapes, taking down the guards and doctors escorting him, and we get the payoff of the previous cutscene with the boots on the desk, and Harley Quinn gets added to the fray, clearly being posted here for a while. She's in control of the security system, further showing this plan has been in the works for months, and we get our first combat tutorial as Joker taunts us over the loudspeaker. The fight introduces the revolutionary free-flow combat. Rocksteady initially intended for Arkham Asylum to be a rhythm-based combat game. During an interview, Rocksteady said, it was initially prototyped in 2D, which popped up whenever you got into a fight, and involved coloured circles bashing into each other. This actually formed the basis of the final system, unquote. The free-flow combat system was revolutionary. X's punch, and after a few successful hits in a row, Batman enters free flow, and enters a state of what some would call a button mashing fest, but quite frankly, this isn't the case. The occasional fight can be sorted out with button mashing, but even in these early instances of combat in the game, the developers knew this would be a complaint. So as we'll see throughout the game, it gets harder and harder until button mashing X simply isn't an option. Free flow also comes with a counter option. Whereas other games encourage parrying as the main way of not getting your head punched through, Arkham's parrying comes in the form of the counter system. On any difficulty under hard, a blue icon will appear just before an enemy makes their move, and if you time it right, they can be countered, and the Dark Knight will launch a flashy counter attack to relieve the pressure and keep things going his way. The free flow system has made waves in the third-person combat world, and continues to do so to this day. And although its first introduction in this game was fairly simple, it goes deeper as we get deeper into the asylum. After taking down the escaped thugs, Joker begins running further into madness, further into the asylum. He tells Batman he won't be going anywhere he doesn't want him to. Here we get introduced to a few things. Chattering teeth, tiny sets of wind-up chatter teeth, that when hit with his patented Batarang, grant the Dark Knight 50 XP. And one of my personal favourite features in this game, the character bios. As characters are introduced and riddles are solved throughout the asylum, the player unlocks these character bios, and although a lot of these are not considered canon anymore with the release of other Arkham media, these kind of work as a standalone snippet of information on each character, and they're really cool. And I think overall these were a pretty nice addition. And while we're on it, let's talk about this game's UI. Every part of this game looks and sounds the part, and this extends to the menus. The kind of messy design of every menu with the outlines all being a bit off just serves the overall feel of this game perfectly. And I kind of wish they brought this style back, especially the character bio art, rather than just being the in-game models. But anyway, Batman begins heading deeper into the asylum's maze-like corridors, the asylum slowly being overrun. The tannoy reminding us every step of the way that the asylum is slowly descending into madness.
Security breach in level B3. Warning. Security breach. Warning. Security breach in level B. Warning. Security breach in level B1.
Floor by floor, corridor by corridor, room by godforsaken room, the asylum is released and left to run wild. A guard tells us he's trying to open the door Joker presumably went through, but we hear over the guard's radio that there's an issue in the pacification centre. An issue by the name of Victor Zsasz, a malicious serial killer who carves his victims into his body using tallies. And this time he's got his hands on a guard. But on the way to rescue the guard we meet Oracle, aka Barbara Gordon, Batman's woman in the chair, daughter of Commissioner Gordon and former Batgirl. But she lost some spine and had to hang the cowl up. Batman tells Oracle over the radio that the Joker has escaped and that her dad's okay before heading into the pacification centre and scoping out the situation. Zsasz has a guard in an electric chair and promises to fry him if he sees anything Batman shaped, and this is where we get our first little taste of the stealth in this game. Batman recognises that the gargoyles around the room can support his weight, and this becomes a key component of stealth in the series, and in this game especially. But for now, Batman swings between the rafters and glide kicks Zsasz, without Victor knowing what hit him, and saves the guard. Victor is genuinely disturbing as all hell in this game, and we'll see more of him later, but for now we get to talk to Harley Quinn, who introduces herself to the player and Batman, and her design in this game is
Pretty hot, huh?
And she shows us that she has Warden Sharp, and with that we complete our trifecta of iconic voice actors brought back to give this game the credibility it so needed back in 2009 after years of bad to okay Batman games. The trio of Kevin Conroy as Batman, Mark Hamill as Joker, and Arlene Sorkin as Harley Quinn really show up with some of their best performances in this game. All three of them make this game feel like something straight out of the iconic animated TV series, and hearing them reprise their role for this game gave it a level of authenticity and familiarity that fans so desperately wanted from a Batman game, in years where Batman was used more as a flamboyant cash cow in gaming. The voice acting in this game overall is amazing, and we'll touch on some more performances later, but for now, just know this game is as close as we'll ever get to playing through an episode of the animated series. The game even being written by Paul Dini, acclaimed writer of Batman media for years, who helped shape the Dark Knight's more modern lore. Back in the Asylum, an Oracle tells Batman that Arkham Asylum has been taken off the grid, and the Joker has supposedly planted bombs around Gotham, and if anyone comes to help Batman, he'll detonate them. But Batman suspects that this just isn't the case, and brushes this off. The real party is on Arkham, and the party as we know it, well, it's just starting. We escape the room through a vent in the wall, and Batman hears guards being slaughtered like dogs over the radio comms. The asylum is reaching a point of no return, and the night has only just begun. Batman comes out of the vent and lands outside of the door he met the guard at earlier. His next problem is the room full of Joker gas. 2 guards hang in peril before the Dark Knight manages to save them, and 1 thug remains. But, depending on the player's moral compass, you can either choose to save this thug or leave him hanging, before ridding the room of the gas. Batman keeps following the trail of destruction. Any possible security measure employed by the asylum has all but failed in the intensive treatment building, but the Bat wades through the madness before finding the Joker, atop a cage suspended above a seemingly infinite black abyss, and as the 2 arch-nemesis exchange words, the Joker plays his wild card. A giant hulking monster, formerly a patient of the asylum, and now on whatever hellacious concoction the Joker has brought to this world. The giant thug charges at the player, and a well-timed batarang stuns the running monster, and Batman can roll out of the way to open a window for attack. The thug can also throw the bodies of his former superiors at Batman. This thug, known to us but not yet to the Dark Knight as a Titan thug, uses the same type of drug that the formidable Bane uses to get his super strength, speed, endurance, and well, general hulkiness. The beauty of prototypes though is that they're prone to fail. So if the player chooses to, they can wait this fight out and play cat and mouse with this man-made horror, and he'll have a heart attack and die due to the overdose of venom. After this failed attempt at getting a beast to overpower Batman, the Joker tells Batman that he'll give him 1 shot to knock him from his perch and end him once and for all. But in that split second, Batman hesitates. That isn't how he does things. And the Joker begins disappearing into the patient isolation wing, as he tells us he's got a party to organise, and there's patients flying in from all over Arkham. After this cutscene, we get our first real introduction to the upgrade system this game brings. Obviously, it's a pretty primitive system by today's standards, but I think there's a lot of beauty in simplicity, and I think this game is a testament to that overall. Throughout gameplay, fights, completing challenges, or even just collecting a certain green collectible we'll find out later, the player earns XP, and every 1000 XP the player earns can be used to upgrade the Dark Knight's arsenal as the night goes on. These upgrades can range from ways to take down your foes in stealth scenarios, new ways to take down your enemies in combat, gadget upgrades, or even multiplying the amount of batarangs you can throw at any given time. This system is pretty archaic by today's gaming standards, and even the standards set by its sequels, but it does exactly what it's supposed to. Batman goes into the asylum with nothing more than a batarang and his skills, so by the end of the game when you're armed to the teeth and can clear rooms of enemies in under 30 seconds, it feels like Rocksteady understood the power fantasy playing as Batman should give to the player, and it does just that. Even with limited gadgets and fluidity in the use of those gadgets, it feels like Rocksteady understood that being the Batman meant adapting to your environment and bringing the right tools for the job, or at least shipping the right tools in on your $1 million fighter jet. Batman always finds a way to win, and with this upgrade system combined with the gadgets given to you throughout the story, it feels like you can win, but with a bit of creativity. Back in the asylum, and a guard who was rendered unconscious until fairly recently opens the control room in the room where Batman fights the first Titan thug, and we get a message from the Joker on the monitor showing Officer Frank Bowles knocking out and taking Gordon hostage, to be taken to Harley Quinn. And during this, Joker tells Batman he literally doesn't want to escape. He's having too much fun and he finds this whole situation hilarious. The guard in the room with us can't open the door to follow the Joker into extreme isolation, so the guard opens the door Batman came through, and after telling Oracle about her dad, Batman finds where Bowles knocked Gordon out, and begins tracking Bowles using the whiskey trail left in the air by the former guard turned inside agent for the Clown Prince of Crime. This is the first time in the asylum we get to live up to Batman's world's greatest detective title, by using filters on his detective vision to isolate different compounds in the air. More namely in this situation, whiskey. It's a cool addition because until this game, there hadn't been a whole bunch of detective-based anything in media outside of the comics. Obviously there were bits here and there. The Dark Knight probably most famously showed this side of the character off a year prior to Arkham Asylum's release. But this was the first real instance of us being physically able to really flex Batman's intelligence as well as his physicality. While tracking Bowles, we can actually hear a phone call between Joker and a worried wife of a guard who works at Arkham.
Hello? What's happening there? I'm trying to contact Steve. Is he there? Hold 1 second. I'll see if I can find him. Thank you. I'm sorry. I've looked everywhere, but I can only find his head. I'll get back to you when I find the rest of them.
This is a really small thing, and you can very easily miss this, but it's something I believe adds a heap of immersion to this world, because when you introduce the idea of these people and these guards having real families that worry just like real people, it brings a whole new level of sympathy and drive to stop the Joker as soon as we can. It doesn't move anything along in the story, but it's a nice touch for the world building aspect of this game, something that Rocksteady thrive on. We make our way further into the asylum, following the trail as we go, and when we reach the elevator system, Harley Quinn drops in to say hello. She then proceeds to drop an elevator on us. This means the only way Batman can follow Harley and potentially save Gordon and Warden Sharp is by climbing up the asylum's wall the old-fashioned way. Here we get our first real chance to fully utilise the movement in the game, while Joker tells us more about Frank Bowles' escapades. We get to run, jump, climb along ledges, crouch, and grapple. This is really an advanced movement tutorial, and it works really well. Story-wise it makes sense, and gameplay-wise it makes even more sense. As the story picks up, so do Batman's needs to keep evolving to the environment around him, and I think this section does a really good job at explaining the different types of movement you can utilise as the night goes on. On our way to the top of the asylum, we also got our first look at the Chronicles of Arkham. The Chronicles of Arkham are stone pillars that can be scanned around the grounds of the asylum, and have been inscribed with scarabs, which in traditional Egyptian lore are symbols of rebirth, a theme these chronicles lean on heavily. The chronicles can be scanned in detective mode, and give a look inside the mind of the asylum's original founder, Amadeus Arkham. These chronicles retell the story of Grant Morrison's A Serious House on Serious Earth, which itself tells the story and the origins of the asylum, and how it came to be. But these chronicles end up being told from the perspective of a mentally insane Warden Quincy Sharp, who mentions people in these chronicles who could have never encountered Amadeus due to his death being decades before some of the aforementioned people were born. But the Warden believes himself to be the spirit of Amadeus Arkham, after becoming obsessed with Amadeus's diaries, which these chronicles are told from. But in reality, it turns out the Warden has been drugged and used as a lab rat by Professor Hugo Strange, a name familiar to, I'm sure, anyone watching this. But for those of you who aren't versed on spending your life getting collectibles in games, or spending your life in Batman comics, the Amadeus Arkham segments of the Serious House tell the story of the asylum, and how it came to be the house of horrors it is now. Amadeus Arkham is inspired to open a mental institution after witnessing the downfall of his mother, who suffered way too long before dying. His hopes were to bring up some kind of compassion to the mentally ill people in Gotham, ironic considering how the asylum went. A little warning here for mentions of sexual assault. It gets pretty dark, so if that's not something you want to hear, skip to this stamp on screen. But just know, Amadeus' family got game-ended pretty badly. For those of you still here though, Amadeus would open the asylum in his home grounds, and on April 1st, 1921, a date you can actually find inscribed on the bell in Amadeus's mansion, Amadeus would head home to his wife and find both his wife and daughter brutally murdered and raped, with his daughter's head being stuffed in a doll's house by Martin Mad Dog Hawkins, who Amadeus would end up treating for a while. The treatment was a miracle. He showed compassion to a man who acted out one of the most horrific actions humanly imaginable on Arkham's family. But a year on from their deaths, Arkham would electrocute Hawkins to death during a therapy session. This act of justifiable revenge, stacked on top of his family being gone, sends Arkham down a hole of mental illness and insanity, and he begins to think he is Arkham's guardian angel. And his diary reveals he feels trapped in the asylum. Amadeus would begin scrawling markings and various words and phrases in his cell, which we can actually find in the game. He believed these would save him and the asylum from evil, but by the end of his days, in the finest twist of irony, Arkham gets admitted to his own asylum as its second ever patient, before dying in the very monster he created. It's believed by many his presence still haunts the walls, and gives Arkham Asylum that patented atmosphere it's renowned for. The chronicles in Arkham Asylum, though, bleed over into Quincy Sharp, believing he's Amadeus' spirit, and this comes from a cocktail of mental fragility, insanity, being taken advantage of, the supernatural aspects of the asylum, and the symbolic parallels between Sharp and Arkham himself. This whole story really reveals a massively prevalent parallel between Sharp, Amadeus, and Batman himself. All three of them begin their mission of helping those less fortunate with really good intentions, helping however they can, but ultimately they become obsessed with this mission, and in the case of Sharp and Arkham, they went insane, but in Bruce Wayne's, he became Batman, a symbol of fear among the criminals and hope among the innocent. In the words of the man himself, they all looked into the abyss, but when it looked back at them, they blinked. Back on the hunt for Harley, Gordon and Bowles, Batman reaches the top of intensive treatment before finding out the inmates are all armed now, taking guns from the armory. This acts as our silent takedown tutorial, a move which, when used correctly, acts as an instant takedown for any thug. It becomes a staple in the franchise and acts as one of the core mechanics of stealth in this game. After taking down the thugs, we get into our first real stealth section of the game. We've learned the movement, the grappling, the silent takedowns and the glide kicks, so now it's time to put it all together here. After taking down the thugs, we find Bowles, dead. Joker figured out how Batman was tracking everyone, and so cut the trail off by killing Bowles and labelling him a dead end, which never fails to get a laugh out of me no matter how cheap it is. After leaving Bowles, Batman... Oh god, wait, hold on, who's that? Oh.
Me, Batman? I know you can. Yes, it is I, Edward Nygma, the Riddler, and more importantly, your intellectual superior.
The Riddler, aka Edward Nygma, hacks into the Dark Knight's comms and tells him about his new scheme to annoy the living test the Bat's intellectual prowess. His first riddle is about as hard as it gets. Nygma also put loads of his iconic green question mark trophies around Arkham Island, made things around the island answers to his riddles, encompassed the Chronicles of Arkham, and decided that the Joker's chattering teeth were now his to assign an XP value to. All jokes aside though, the riddles give this game a new challenge, as finding all of these collectibles is actually pretty fun and challenging, which is exactly what these type of collectibles should be. It also allows for the game to give us crucial, or not so crucial, lore regarding the wider Arkham universe, as at this point, with one game in the series, the characters weren't really explored in this universe. They do this by including the character bios, the character trophies, gameplay orientated things like challenge maps, or even just XP to upgrade Batman as the night gets longer. We begin making our way out of the asylum and can actually hear a radio report by resident annoying journalist Jack Ryder.
Guys, for this interruption to our regular broadcast, Jack Ryder is live from the Gotham Bay area with some breaking news.
This is Jack Ryder with breaking news in the Gotham Bay. We are getting reports of an armed siege on Arkham Island. 2 minutes ago, Joker broadcast to all news channels this chilling message.
Greetings, Gotham. This is the voice of your new master. Oh, hang on. I skipped a bit. Joker here. I'm in control of Arkham Island, and you can all consider it out of bounds. If I see any lawmen, vigilantes, or do-gooders in tights coming this way, I'll start detonating random bombs around the city. What's it mean? A kindergarten, a hospital, a billionaire's mansion. Oh, choices, choices, choices.
All access to the island has been restricted, airspace is closed off, and early reports suggest that Batman himself is trapped on the island. We'll be right here, reporting live on any development.
It's also an answer to a riddle, but it's cool to know the situation is being reported on outside of the island. And as we make our way through the caves of the intensive treatment and get to the end of it all, we can see it in its glory for the first time. Arkham Island. This initial sweeping view over Arkham Asylum East has become iconic for so many reasons. It's the first time we see Arkham Mansion in all its glory, patient zero for the building blocks that make the horrific island what it is. The music as you step out of the intensive treatment building, followed by the shot of Batman observing the outside world, is great. And although he's probably seen this hundreds of times, this is the first time the player has seen this island before in this light. So I have to give the presentation for this huge props, and without coming out with a little title card, this is as close as we get, and it's a trend the Arkham games followed really closely, and it's something that added to the cinematic feel of these games. Not giving us an out-and-out title card, but still giving us a cinematic overview of the world we're about to explore. The architecture on display throughout the island is brought to the foreground here as well. We've seen the inside of buildings, but this is the first time we're getting an outside view, and it sets the tone perfectly. The architecture here is beautiful and haunting. It has that Tim Burton-esque gothic feel, but you can tell Rocksteady put their own twist on it, and it shows. Everything feels slightly off. The dome of the botanical garden emanates this green hue. The mansion stands slightly off-centre and towers over the rest of the island, and I think this serves as an allegory for the spirit of Amadeus himself. Slightly left of being mentally sound, but still filling the island with his presence for better or worse. And in fact we can actually find his grave in the mansion's graveyard, dug up. There was once an urban legend in the early days of the Arkham YouTube scene that you could actually find Amadeus's ghost around this area, and this got disproved pretty easily, but the very fact this game spawns such legends is testament to the island Rocksteady crafted here. Every building unique, every path or door used, every door leading to more horrors than the last, and this island reeks of character. In fact, after Batman and Joker, I'd say the island itself is probably the most interesting character here. Its charm mixed with its pure aura gives us an unforgettable experience which no Arkham game could quite replicate even over 15 years later. And we also get our first real glide here, the first time we really get to spread our leather wings and fly like the Bat Gods intended. We use the cape in combat sections and intensive treatment, but this is the first time we really get to fly and feel the weightiness and satisfaction of Batman's extended movement system. We leave our perch overlooking the island's ground zero and head to find Gordon. Here we can see the guards still have control over certain parts of the island. Their grip is slipping, but there's still some sort of tranquility here. It's short-lived because after being told the Batmobile is under attack, we find two guards who are under pressure from some inmates, but after taking them out, Batman heads to the Batmobile to find Harley Quinn has set some thugs to trash it. Sadly for them, this is pretty short-lived, as Batman runs in and takes them out before taking out his first new gadget for the night, the ever-useful and now iconic explosive gel. Mainly used for exploding weak walls and structures, it also has its uses in stealth gameplay, being able to knock down enemies and leave them vulnerable for ground takedowns, leaning into Arkham Asylum's theme of leaving the player the tools for a versatile playstyle, but letting them do what they wish with them. You're never told it can knock down thugs, but it can, and it's really cool. It's a great little feature that gives Batman another tool in both exploration, combat and stealth, a theme followed by just about every one of his gadgets. Gordon's trail begins when Batman finds his old tobacco pipe, a gift given to him by his daughter, as we later find out. Gordon was smart and left a trail. Batman knows he'd never leave this behind, and so does Oracle, so this was intentional. Batman tracks the trail through a weakened wall and uses the explosive gel to enter the west wing of the island, and we find two thugs decorating the visitor centre. And although this might look like a planned little event to contribute to the world building, the visitor centre is one of the most important buildings in the game. So let's go and see what the visitor centre has to offer. After all, we are visitors to the island, right?
Come in, sit down, take off your mask. So, Bats, I was thinking, you really could use a friend in here. Someone to talk to, share secrets with. Shall we start with the big one? Who is that behind the mask? Why do you feel the need to go out into the world and fight people like me? Do you really think you can win? We'll see.
Atmosphere is this game's bread and butter, and this building is the best example of it in the early game. The whole building is full of this slightly off-putting, yellowy hue, but the visitor centre kind of feels like something out of another world. Its slightly distorted camera view the game locks you into makes this one of the most memorable locations in the game. And the best part is, you could probably go through the whole game and not come here until the finale. It's one of those places which adds to the game immensely, because if you keep returning after each major event in the game, the TV head Joker will change, talking to you about what's just happened, or even, as we've just seen, giving little Jokerized psych evaluations to Batman, which is pretty cool. I love the quick zoom-in shot it does when you first enter the building to show the Joker at the end of the corridor. It reminds me of something out of a Saw movie or a classic horror, the way it pans around and then zooms in really quickly to show you you're not alone. Honestly, I just really love the visitor centre here, and as the night goes on we'll be back here a few times. We head over to the medical facility though, and here we find a guard in a watchtower who tells us Joker's men have moved through here recently. We can also hear the now distorted introductory chime of Arkham's tannoy system, followed by an announcement from the Joker.
I really appreciate all the hard work. You know, watching you guys is like a night in. Watching my favorite movie. What was the name of that movie again? Oh yes, Attack of the Stupid Bungling Idiots who can't find an even bigger idiot running around dressed like a man. Now get to it. I'm getting bored.
He makes a ton of these as the game goes on, and they're all pretty funny. I also like the fact that not even the tannoy noise was safe from Joker's corruption and breakout. The whole island at this point is under his thumb, and so the fact that every part of it is Jokerized now represents the downfall in control the guards and Batman have, and I think this is just really cool. Rocksteady really put a lot of work into the off-screen narrative being told along the on-screen narrative in this game, and I think little touches like this just really add to the whole world in general. But we head down to medical and find Harley Quinn behind an electrified gate, and Gordon just off to the side. We don't see Gordon, but a quick scan in detective mode reveals he's here and he's alive. He even speaks a couple of lines before Harley Quinn shuts him up. Harley doesn't let us through the electrified gate, so Batman heads to the rooftops, his usual spot, and blows a hole in a weak wall, gaining access to the medical facility. As Batman heads through the vents of the medical facility, we gather that Joker wants the doctors in the facility rounded up, and he seems pretty serious about this, threatening to leave his men to die if they don't search every inch of the facility. Just before we head into the next room, I wanted to talk about a seemingly inconsequential part of this game, but something I think is pretty important in setting the tone and feel of this game. And that, believe it or not, is the vents. Vents are something we come across all the time in Arkham Asylum, whether it be to find Riddler trophies, continuing the story, or even just in general exploration. I think they've become so entwined with the Arkham series that to see that they haven't really changed in terms of use as the series went on is a testament to the great work the developers did when adding a feature that's pretty underrated, especially in this game. It really adds to the feel that the player and Batman are getting around the island in a way which won't arouse suspicion and will keep him under the radar, instead of just using the doors or placing holes in buildings for Batman to go through. We have the vents, which serve as a way to both serve the immersion of being Batman and the immersion of navigating this old rundown asylum on the night of its worst breakout. You're a rat in a cage and Joker is the overseer. You have to be silent, move unseen and unheard, and the vents are a great way to do this. We leave a vent and enter arguably the most iconic stealth sequence in not only Asylum, but its sequels, the Sanatorium. When we talk about the classic Arkham stealth section and the layout Rocksteady typically uses, the Sanatorium in this game is what I think of. A long room with 3 levels of verticality, those being the ground floor, the second floor, and the walkways. The gargoyles, the environmental hazards, and this room in general has enough design and care put into it to last a lifetime, and it really shows because this room generally holds up quite well, hence why it was put in the 2015 game Batman Arkham Knight in the DLC packs. As soon as we enter the classic stealth room, the music plays, the track Stealthy Bat from Nick Arundel, and suddenly it puts you in the shoes of a predator hunting its prey down. I'm talking a bat in the rafters taking out mice and spiders in the cave you call home. This whole area is quintessential Arkham gameplay. It also has a really easy and memorable layout, which players are still finding ways to this day of exploiting and utilising to complete this room as quickly as possible. The room even made a return in Arkham Knight as the challenge map, Silent Night, where even a moron like me has shaved my personal time down to sub 6 seconds to complete the room. It provides depth, use of gadgets, and a bit of know-how to get through this room, but my god it is so good, and probably still to this day is my favourite stealth segment in any of these games, and houses at least 2 really cool Easter eggs. The first being Killer Croc's old cell, which for the life of me I can't figure out how we ever fit in here, but maybe we're talking pre-Asylum Croc when he just looked like a normal man. And the second, and I'm not sure if this is canon, but it's the area where Jason Todd, the second Robin, was tortured by the Joker. This doesn't make much sense canonically, because in the canon he was in an abandoned wing of Arkham Asylum, but it's the room shown in Arkham VR, so we're running with it. Batman clears the room and begins talking to a doctor, who tells him there's still 3 more doctors to account for. Dr. Young, Chen, and Kellerman, all of which are being held separately in 3 rooms around the facility. Batman heads out, and gameplay-wise you can do whichever you want to here first, but for the sake of this video, we're doing him in the order that I'm about to read to you. Batman heads to the X-ray room first and finds Dr. Chen, who's strapped to a chair, and when the Joker launches an ambush on the Dark Knight, he takes them out and frees the first Doctor. If we head to the top floor of this room though, there's a whiteboard full of shifts and other cool information for those concerned, and if we take a look we can find some pretty cool Easter eggs. First off, we can see Dr. Thomas Elliot is listed as an active doctor, and for those who don't know, that's Hush, Bruce Wayne's childhood friend turned mortal enemy. We can also see the game takes place on a Monday into a Tuesday. That's cool, I guess. We can also see Mad Hatter, Clayface, Great White Shark and Firefly all on this board as patients, which is pretty cool. And it's a bit of a shame that Hatter, Great White Shark and Firefly were all cut from the game or not considered as bosses. I know Mad Hatter was supposed to be in the Botanical Gardens and that could have been cool. But anyway, Batman heads to find Dr. Kellerman, who's trapped in a room with Aaron Cash, a senior guard, staunch Killer Croc hater, and reoccurring character in the franchise, which is attached to a room full of Joker's laughing gas. Batman has to platform his way around the room and use some well-placed batarangs to rid the room of gas, and after doing so, Cash and Kellerman are free. We can also choose to drop this inmate who's hanging on for dear life into the gas, definitely killing him.
You know you're gonna save me. Hurry up and do it.
And in this room there's a little billboard notification sign which asks for a, quote, Dr. Clooney to head to the gynecology room. I did have a joke written here about how George Clooney's Batman portrayal was piss poor or something along those lines, but I couldn't write a good joke, so I just cut it out. So imagine a joke that relates to gynecology and George Clooney if you really want to. We can hear a few things over the tannoy around the facility. First off, a note from Dr. Young about the new Project Titan and Patient X, who we later discover is Bane. The Doctor tells us that this is a revolutionary formula, capable of making people more than they are. We can also hear something which fills me with a lot of nostalgia, the Arkham Asylum medical facility introduction. It's so good. If I thought about it hard enough, I could probably recite it word for word. I'm not sure why it stuck with me, but it's so cool hearing this happy-go-lucky man talk about how safe and secure the asylum is, while the asylum's corridors are filled with blood of inmates and doctors alike, being taken over by the very madmen it swore to keep housed it. And finally, we can find and hear a link to ArkhamCare.com, which was actually a real website advertising Arkham Asylum and its world-class facilities, which is really cool, and you can find it to this day using the Wayback Machine, and it features videos from inside the asylum, a message from Quincy Sharp, which can also actually be heard in-game, and a host of information about the asylum, which features mentions about successes curing Harvey Dent, obviously Two-Face, and the Ventriloquist, which is funny considering the final cutscene of this game features Batman heading to stop Dent from robbing a bank. So this is either a barefaced lie, or maybe he just relapsed. Batman heads to go and find Dr. Young. Young's surrounded by armed guards, but thanks to the explosive gel, he makes short work of them and rescues Young and heads back to the sanatorium. On the way back, Joker comes on the TV, telling us he's got two old friends who are quote-unquote joining the party, one of whom is terrified he'll leave without saying goodbye, and the other is going to be a complete surprise. Here we also get our first introduction to the knife-wielding henchman, our first variety of enemy type in the game and one who's definitely a step up from the normal inmates. The knife wielder is a high-risk patient, who's noticeable by their different coloured jumpsuit, who wields knives and can only be taken down with stunning them first and then hitting them, or pulling them over and using a ground takedown. Alternatively, you can spend your sweet XP points and buy a special combo takedown upgrade to make short work of these guys. It's cool that they're introduced fairly early in the game, because it gives the player plenty of chance to become accustomed to them, surrounded by large groups of enemies. And they're a pretty cool addition to the enemies we face. Batman heads back to the sanatorium and meets the doctors and Aaron Cash. Dr. Young insists she needs to get back to Arkham Mansion to get her notes, and Aaron Cash, ever the gentleman, decides to escort her, before the elevator comes up and the doctors go and hide. Batman takes out the thugs who've come out of the elevator and begins heading down to the lower levels of the asylum, following Gordon's trail. The elevator becomes filled with some sort of gas, and the Joker tells Batman he could kill him right now. He's got him dangling over a near never-ending drop after all. But that's the least of the Batman's worries.
There is no crane. Only Scarecrow.
Here's our first introduction to the best part of this game, Scarecrow. Scarecrow was such a great choice to be the mental foil in this game. He works at the asylum, he knows its halls as well, if not better than Batman, and as we'll come to find out, the only thing he doesn't know is who he's just injected with his fear gas. Batman begins making his way through the lower levels of the asylum to find Gordon. After breathing in Crane's toxin, the lines between fiction and reality have been blurred, and the world's just a few degrees left of normal. Gordon gets dragged away from Batman. He chases him and finds him dead. The trail ends here. Gordon's dead. Or is he? What's real anymore? Who knows? We're in Crane's world now, and we need a way out of here. Batman tries to call Oracle, but the lines are full. There's no help anymore. We're on our own. Beetles, scarabs, whatever they are, they're filling the corridor, and that's enough to know we need to find what's going on here. The world's tilting, the eyes of Gotham's Crusader now glow a crimson red, and the lights on the comms are full. Batman reaches the morgue. Ominous voices of the dead patients that once roamed these very halls tell us to leave, to get out of this place. And when we try to do that, we can't, ending up where we just came from. A fun use of deception by Crane. A warning shot, at least. 3 body bags now lay on the morgue's tables. As we approach them, they move. Batman unzips them and... Mum? Dad? What's going on here? The zombies of Bruce's past have come back to haunt him in his most vulnerable moment. Crane's toxin is working overtime here, but there's still one more body bag to open. Whew, that was a close call, but I think it's over. No, far from it. Crane proclaims that we're in his world now, and he's not wrong. The once fully formed walls of the asylum now lay strewn about in an almost Mario-esque platforming sequence, which Batman needs to navigate without being seen by the former psychiatrist. We have to be on top of our game here. One wrong move and our mind will crumble, and as the old saying goes, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Batman keeps turning into Scarecrow, a symbolic way of showing the grasp Crane has on Wayne's mind. He's breaking his mind down, crushing it, and making it his. But the iron will of the man they call Batman works its magic, and he finds his way out. A bat symbol, a symbol of will and perseverance. He shines it directly at Crane, taking him out of his own world. For now at least, the mind of the Dark Knight is spared from the incomprehensible horrors curated by the Scarecrow. There's still one small issue though, the dead commissioner. But wait, the lines are open again. Oracle asks Batman what happened, in which he responds that he had a run-in with Scarecrow. Nothing to worry about. Why not mention the matter of a dead father? Does he understand Gordon isn't dead? Surely Joker wouldn't let anyone kill Gordon if he went through all of that effort to kidnap him, right? Crane's gas must have played with his mind. But still, does he think it will take Oracle's mind off the mission if he tells her father's dead? The mission's the most important thing, right? Batman leaves the morgue and quickly puts his mind to rest. Gordon's not dead. The gas affected him more than ever before. This unfortunate nameless guard took the form of Gordon in his mind, which means Gordon's still out there somewhere. Batman's close. Really close. This whole section is absolute cinema. From entering the elevator and the subtle streams of gas entering it and Batman coughing, to the world around the Dark Knight crumbling, this whole segment is pure gold. This made Scarecrow one of my favourite villains. It's so unique, but as we'll come to find out, this isn't the last we'll hear from Crane and his gas. And thank God, because if this game somehow couldn't pass as a softcore horror game before, it sure as hell can now. The slight camera tilt, Batman's eyes turning this glowing red, the comms lines being quote-quote full, the Beetles flooding the hallway like they filled Amadeus Arkham's mother's mouth in the source material showing a mental decline, as it shows Batman's here. Lord above, I think this is the closest a Batman game's ever got to perfection. This 10-minute detour into the world of Scarecrow's twisted design shows that this game didn't know its own limits, and if it did, it went on to ignore them. The very fact Scarecrow was in this game in the first place was a miracle, and definitely only happened because of his inclusion in the 2005 movie Batman Begins. So the fact Rocksteady did what they did here with him makes this whole section feel surreal. And can we talk about his design? Dare I say it, it's his best design ever, maybe? The sort of thrown together feel of the costume, the malnourished looking frame of the man underneath the mask, and the colours being that of a typical Scarecrow and being very reminiscent of his classic designs in the comics and animated series, just make this Scarecrow feel as real as they come. And the voice acting by Dino Andrade was spot on. Whenever Scarecrow appears in other media now, especially in comics, this is the voice I hear in my head. In the same way Conroy and Hamill made Batman and Joker their own, Andrade to me made Scarecrow his. But alas, we've got a commissioner to save, so let's keep going. We find Gordon strapped to a chair by Harley Quinn, and just outside of the room he's held in a bear which is described in a riddle as the bane of someone's life. Interesting. There's a catch to this whole scenario though. If any of Quinn's guards see us, hear us, or so much as smell our titanium-dipped tri-weave armour, she's going to cook our commissioner like a batch of meth in New Mexico. Batman obviously doesn't let this stipulation affect him. The thugs are taken out with ease, and Quinn is knocked out, for now at least. Gordon tells Batman we're not alone, and the pair head down to the glass house in the middle of the room. A glass house containing a man strung up by pipes and wires, begging for Batman to cut him down. But Joker does these honours for us, pumping the man full of venom. Bane. Bane's on Arkham Island. Why? Well, we'll talk about that later, but for now our main priority is the hulking Mexican drug addict who's not too happy to see us. I guess this was what Joker meant when he said one of the guests he's invited would be as shocked to see us as we would be to see them. Dr. Young drained all the venom from Bane's blood. Whatever experiments she's conducting aren't good, and after Bane's been dealt with we need to figure out what's going on here. Bane charges at Batman, and the two fight before we finally get to put our hands on Bane ourselves. The Bane boss fight is pretty simple in terms of gameplay. It's essentially a reskinned Titan Thug boss fight with more pizzazz. It's fun, but nothing we haven't dealt with before. But this time, this Titan Thug won't have a heart attack and die, and he's brought back up. Batarangs are the key to this. A well-timed Batarang, a dodge roll, followed by a few punches and a swipe at his venom tank, see Bane fairly easily dispatched of. I also again want to talk about the character design here. Bane's design here is probably one of my favourite ever, but that's just a side note, back to the boss fight. Bane can throw chunks of walls at us, which is absolutely terrifying on a first playthrough, and these, if dodged, can actually hit his own backup, which is always quite funny. Batman defeats Bane and the walls crumble down on him, and we end up topside. We talk to Gordon, but Bane's not done. He bursts out of the wall and picks the bat up and confirms Nightfall as canon. Yes, that's right, at least to some extent, Nightfall, the story of Bane breaking the bat and making Gotham's Dark Knight go into hiding, is actually canon here, which is really cool. But Batman came prepared this time and called the Batmobile in advance, and the Batmobile crashes into Bane, this time breaking him. It's also worth noting that twice throughout this encounter, Bane calls Dr. Young Bruja. As Gordon reluctantly heads back to the island, he asks Batman what it means. Batman responds,
"It's Spanish for witch."
Batman talks to Oracle and tells her to search the city's computers and go through anything she can find on Dr. Young, and he'll go through it once he gets back to the Batcave. Batman put a Batcave here on Arkham Island years ago after finding a place called Dead Man's Point, where asylum inmates would jump to the rocks below to kill themselves. But one day, Batman saved one of these unfortunate inmates and began moving stuff here in case of a situation like this one. A good move by the Dark Knight, as he'll need all the help he can get for the rest of tonight. Batman suspects Dr. Young was working with Venom, hence Bane being here on the island, and points out that Bane seemed more powerful and more aggressive than usual, and Joker wants the Venom, which can't be a good sign. So he begins heading to Dead Man's Point. Obviously though, we've got some time to kill, so we head to the Visitors Centre to get the Joker's opinion on everything that just happened here. But this time things are a bit different. Apart from the Joker at the end of the corridor, there's one near the door behind some glass, which seems to switch poses every time you look away from it and look back. When I first noticed this, it freaked me out to the point of not wanting to come back here ever again. But alas, we head further down the corridor to talk to Joker, who begins probing Batman about his childhood. Now, this is interesting because I'm not sure if this is a subtle hint to him having an idea of who Batman is, or something along those lines, but it's never explored further, so I think this is just a general question he's asking to poke fun at real therapy appointments. He then brings up the appearance of Bane, and taunts Batman for not knowing why he was there to begin with. But this won't be a question for too long as Batman heads to the Batcave. When we begin navigating the cave system, there's not only giant skulls, Probably just an artistic choice, but it always cracked me up that these skulls are about 3 times as large as everyone's head in this game. But there's also plenty of that patented Arkham atmosphere to make your spine shiver a little bit. The cave feels used, but not for a long time. Like it was once a functioning part of the island that got phased out when inmates started throwing themselves off the edge of them to escape the hell they were in. Batman leaps off the edge, gliding and nailing the superhero landing into the entrance of the cave. Once inside, he begins combing through the notes Oracle pulled up to find out that Dr. Young was experimenting on patients using a modified version of the Venom formula. But on further inspection, he finds the formula has gone missing, and if Joker finds this formula before Batman, he'll have the power to create an army of, as he says, 1,000 Banes. A horrifying thought when you consider the damage one Bane can do given the right tools. The design for this Batcave, by the way, amazing. It's a smaller cave due to it not being the one under Wayne Manor, but the suspended bridges and the waterfalls, the classic bat symbol branded floor, and the hanging Batwing hit every single note you'd have expected from an experienced Batman's cave at this stage in his career. It's the first time we see a Batcave in the Arkhamverse, and it nails it. It feels like a Batcave. And as short as the time we get here, it's nice to visit it, and no Batman prepared for this type of night. He probably knew at some point Joker or someone would try this eventually. He also picks up the most overpowered and broken gadget in this game, the Batclaw. Remember earlier when I said the gadgets in this game are very multi-purpose? Well, this is the pinnacle of that. Want a grate off a wall? Done. Want to clear an entire room of armed thugs in like under a minute? Done. Want to pull an enemy over and finish them off with a ground takedown? Also done. This thing is a beast, but just wait until we meet its big brother later on, because oh my god, it's amazing. Anyway, Batman heads out of the cave to Arkham Mansion, where Cash took Young earlier to find her notes, which now we know contain the formula, which explains her eagerness to get them earlier back in the sanatorium. Batman leaves the cave and enters the sewer system. We can overhear a thug talking to Joker, and I'll let this play out because it's quite funny, although it is genuinely kind of grim.
Sorry, boss. Took a little longer to find them than you figured it would.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try and be more precise next time I'm planning an island takeover.
Hey, I didn't mean...
Well, criticism I can take. I mean, I'm not perfect. Well, come to think of it, I'm pretty close to perfect, aren't I? Where was I? Oh, yes. Criticism from a worm like you. A worm who's only crawling around free because I arranged to open his cell is something I will not tolerate.
I'm sorry, boss. I didn't mean it like that. Please.
Oh, we'll see now you're apologetic. I'll just have someone drive round to your house and break your wife's leg, okay?
But Joker!
You got a problem with my generous nature?
No, I guess not. Thanks?
Oh, don't mention it. Let's just consider the matter closed. Did I ever tell you the one about the guy who came home to find his wife a paraplegic?
Anyway, after taking out some thugs who are attempting to let Killer Croc loose, like that's a smart idea, in getting our first real introduction to the earliest form of free-flow quickfire gadgets, Batman has— oh shit!
We'll find you. Rip your flesh like paper.
After turning around and slowly heading down this corridor away from Wayland Jones, we get back into the sewer junction, where Batman has to climb his way up and out to the surface the old-fashioned way, as the walls are too unstable for the grapnel to work. On his way up, Oracle hacks into Dr. Young's emails, and we find out Joker was paying Young to do these experiments on Titan under the alias of Jack White. He was paying her until she had a change of heart and decided to block the payments, but the Joker wasn't going to let her loose that easily and began threatening her and sending her pictures of dead babies. Charming. But he basically decided that he was going to do it himself, and the only way to do the experiments that he wanted to do was to get Young's notes, which are on Arkham Island. This whole section's really cool. I was going to try and avoid using the Metroidvania cliche people like to use when talking about the layout for this game, but it's hard to avoid. For those of you who aren't chronically talking about video games, a Metroidvania is a subgenre of action or adventure games focused on a guided but non-linear experience, where the player can explore freely but some sections may be blocked off, needing gadgets or certain skills to be able to get to these locations or areas, and it focuses on the tight movement combined with good level design to force the player to experiment with their movement and become more at one with the character. But as you can probably imagine by hearing that description, Arkham Asylum definitely carries this DNA with it throughout its gameplay loop. The game has serious platforming DNA, and at certain points such as this, it feels like playing a Batman-based Mario game due to the heavy, near-platforming style of gameplay. Not that this is a bad thing, it's quite the opposite. It's actually really cool Rocksteady used this style of gameplay as a base for the exploration of the game, because it fits so well. And although they'd shift away from this with later games like Arkham City, Origins and Knight, its general style can still be felt here. Before we headed up to the manor, I want to talk about the patient interview tapes. These little collectibles are a really cool way of giving us some background and context on some of the characters in the game. They follow doctors and staff of Arkham interviewing the inmates of the asylum, and they can be found scattered around the island in character-specific locations. For example, Croc's tapes are all found in the sewer, Poison Ivy's are all in the garden, etc. But despite these no longer being canon, they're a really cool little feature, which although didn't get brought back in the later games, got brought back spiritually, which is nice to see. After getting back onto the grounds of the island, Batman heads to the mansion and finds out the thugs have gotten their hands on snipers. This adds a new element of danger to traversing the island, because although you could sneak around their lines of sight, it's best to try and take them out. Their snipers' red lines of sight can be seen in detective vision, but not in normal vision, meaning you can take these guys out fairly easily if you can get behind them and use a silent takedown, or even just go for a full-on assault if you're quick enough to do it. But considering the amount of damage they do, it's probably not worth it in the long run. After taking down the thugs, Batman enters the mansion, ground zero for this madhouse, and is told to go away by some inmates at the front door, and given the electrified fence in the way, he doesn't really have a choice. So Batman leaves and uses the Batclaw to enter through a gate at the top of the asylum. After getting in, he makes his way to the main hall, where Joker's thugs are turning the place inside out to try and find Dr. Young's notes. After taking out the thugs and walking through the working metal detector, I can't even explain to you, this blew my mind. A few years ago I was just playing, and there's a stealth section later on which we'll talk about, and I walked through the metal detector to get to the enemy slightly quicker, and it went off and he killed me. It's insane, the attention to detail in this game is amazing. Batman heads to the library. On the way we can find references to Penguin and Catwoman, but we carry on and find thugs searching through the library. We take them out and Joker tells us some hostages are on the ground floor. Batman rescues the hostages after dropping a chandelier through the roof to get to them, and then he heads back to find Aaron Cash has been taken hostage in the records office. Batman heads to find Cash and finds out the thugs now have suicide collars, which tell the guards the inmate's heart rate at any given time. But now, thanks to Joker, these are used so the Clown Prince of Crime can alert his criminal contingent to their comrades' complete lack of competence and consciousness, and use that knowledge to hunt down the Bat responsible. These suicide collars aren't a huge issue yet, but I assure you this is an issue which becomes bigger as the Bat gets closer to stopping Joker's plans. And here we enter another iconic stealth segment, the records office. After using the tools at our disposal to rescue Cash, namely the Batclaw, he tells us Young went to her office to collect her notes, so that's our next stop. I want to talk about the interior design of this mansion. It's really good. It's got this old-fashioned feel to it, which makes it feel slightly unnerving, but for a different reason than the rest of the island. All I can compare it to is staying at your grandparents' house, and you wake up in the night and all you can hear is like a faint buzzing, and all you can see in the dark is the red light coming from the TV. It's a weird feeling, but that's all I can really compare it to. It's really cool and keeps that grand architecture the rest of the island has going for it, which makes the island feel like a character in itself. Batman enters the rafters and makes it to Young's office, and on the way you can actually find Amadeus Arkham's cell, which he found himself bound in, scratching on the wall, as described in the Chronicles, and obviously Grant Morrison's A Serious House on Serious Earth. A wheelchair can be found which has a wheel that just won't stop spinning, and a ghostly noise which I can't find anything on, so if you know anything about that, leave it in the comment section because it really freaked me out, and it was the first time I heard this when I was recording gameplay for this video. I assume it's Amadeus' ghost or at least something to do with him. Either that or I'm completely hearing things. This ties into the origins of Arkham in the game and novel really well. Obviously they are one and the same, and although the story of A Serious House on Serious Earth doesn't happen in this universe, in fact I believe we're actually kind of playing through the Arkhamverse's version of this story, it's good to know that the origins are the same. We get to Young's office to find that Joker's thugs are trying to break in, but we stop them and get there first, to find that Young had her notes taken. In fact, she got to them first, thank God. Batman tracks Young's fingerprints to the library and finds where she hid the notes, and with the explosive gel, he destroys them. But when Joker comes over the tannoy, he doesn't seem to be annoyed about this, almost clowning on Batman for thinking that would stop him. He tells us Zaz has Young, and he's going to interrogate her for the formula, and obviously probably kill her. On our way out of the library, we see Batman coughing as some mysterious gas filters through the airways. Welcome to round 2 of the Scarecrow House of Horrors. Rain fills the once dry corridors of Arkham Mansion. But how? The corridors begin morphing, changing form into the place it all began for one man in the building. Crime Alley. The place the Waynes were tragically shot all those years ago. Mentally, Bruce has become that little boy again. Scared, terrified of an uncertain future. He remembers the kindness shown to him by Gordon, a man he works with so closely now. A friend, and an ally. This can't go on. He snaps out the childhood memories, and like before, he knows how to defeat this nightmare. A bat signal atop the mansion will be enough to drive the nightmares back from whence they came. There's people who need him. Young, the Warden, Gotham. Batman fights through Scarecrow's undead horde of skeletons, a new way of scaring the bat. But they go down like any other cowardly thug. Scarecrow's veiled threats fall on veteran ears. Rest in peace, Batman. There's no escape, Batman. Time to die, Batman. Every night, over and over and over for so many years. Every night. And yet, he's still here. Batman gets to the top of the tower and aims his symbol at Crane, burning him in his light like before. But this time, the nightmare feels more real than ever before. More personal. The lines between Batman and Bruce have never been more blurred, and the lines between sanity and insanity seem to have been wiped out as soon as Scarecrow's gas entered Batman's lungs. This entire night wasn't a breakout attempt, or even an attempt at making Batman scared. It was an attempt to break him, to put him through every last possible way of torturing him, until, in the final act, Joker could swoop in and take the glory of beating the Bat. A madhouse orchestra conducted by the Joker and played by Gotham's Most Wanted. Batman snaps out of Scarecrow's second nightmare at the top of the mansion, having faced his darkest day again in Scarecrow's second masterfully crafted boss encounter. I could harp on how much I love Crane's outings in this game for the next hour and put you all to sleep, but everything I said before applies here. But this time the addition of the skeleton thugs is pretty cool. They go down really easily, but it's a nice change of pace and keeps this mission type fresh and fun. Batman realises that there's only one way out of here. Down. He uses a batarang to drop the bell down to the lobby, and on the way to track Dr. Young and save her from Victor Zsasz, we come across our next new enemy type, the stun stick enemies. These enemies are nearly impossible to take head on. You need to evade over the top of them and hit them from behind to take them down. These guys can cause huge issues in crowded combat segments for two reasons. One, no head-on attacks, disrupting combos. 2. Their attacks can't be countered. They're a nice addition, and combined with the knife wielders, combat is now more of a chess match than a button-mashing test of patience. Rocksteady knew what they were doing here, and I think they smashed it out of the park with the enemy varieties in their first game. And these thugs would actually be a mainstay in the series, which shows how well integrated they were. Batman finds Young held hostage by Zsasz, and dispatches the Twisted Killer with a well-placed batarang to the dome. Batman speaks to Young, who tells him about a secret lab in the gardens which houses Titan. As Young heads to her safe, she is blown up by a bomb planted by Joker, and although the Doctor dies, Batman is merely knocked out. When he wakes up, he sees Harley Quinn with the Warden. She hits him with his staff and escapes. Batman wakes up properly and takes down her thugs before using his detective mode to get a sample from the Warden's staff, and he begins tracking him. Before we head out of this room, the Warden's office, it has a couple of cool Easter eggs. First, Arnold Wesker's Scarface doll, which pops up at the end of the game, and more interestingly, and I'm sure more predictably, the Arkham City planning room. An Easter egg I'm sure most of you would know about by now, but if you don't, you can spray some well-placed explosive gel on a certain wall and blow it up. The room behind gives us an early glimpse at the future at this point. A planning room for Arkham City, and although it looks quite different from what we get in the 2011 sequel, it's still pretty cool. It shows that Rocksteady were planning this game years in advance. This room is completely unmarked and really well hidden, but alas, we have a Warden to track, so there's no point harping on the future. Batman tracks the Warden across the island, leaving the mansion behind and heading to Arkham West. Here though, we can hear Warden Sharp being forced to deliver a monologue over the speaker, and it's quite funny. It's grim, but it's funny.
As of 10 minutes ago, I have made it illegal to walk on the floor in any part of the asylum. Anyone caught doing so will be... Oh, this is stupid. Anyone caught will have their legs removed and perform magic tricks for Emperor Joker. There, I did it.
You're doing great, Sharpie. Ready for more?
And that's a theme when it comes to the humour of this game. It borders being genuinely kind of disgusting, but it walks that classic line the Joker tends to walk with his quote-unquote jokes. And we track Sharp through the caves of the island, and here we hear some, again, pretty grim dialogue, which I'll let you listen to now.
Questioning the boss again? You've done nothing but whine since we got busted out.
Yeah, Joker sends his girlfriend down and tells us to guard the tunnel. We guard the tunnel. Joker tells us to kill the bat. We kill the bat.
Joker told me to kill my sister once.
Did you do it?
Hell yeah! Never liked her anyway.
You're cold, man. Funny thing, he said the same to me. I told him I didn't even have a sister. He just kept telling me to do it. So I got in my car, ran over the first bitch I saw. Joker seemed happy.
Ha. He's a barrel of laughs. Kind of a mystery, you know? I mean, don't get me wrong, but he acts all crazy one minute, and then the next he's all plans and jobs. Ugh, who knows what goes on in that head?
Not our problem. But if he sends Harley back down here, we'll really be in trouble. Anyone got anything to drink?
Nope. Got a handful of meds from a dead nurse back in medical. Took them. Not even a buzz. Where was she taking the Warden anyway?
Would you all just shut the hell up? This is supposed to be an ambush!
Yeah. Just wanted something to take the edge off, you know?
Just keep it down! I don't want to take any chances.
On the way to Sharp, we can clearly see the island is completely lost. The whole thing has gone to pot, and the guards and Batman have no control over the island anymore. Joker's men are completely at the steering wheel, and this can be seen as the low point of Batman's control over the island at this point. Well, so far. We reach the penitentiary, the outright creepiest building in the game. The home of the most far-gone and unfortunate patients on Arkham Island, and as we'll find out, these inmates are as deranged as they are dangerous. We enter the madhouse of the madhouse, still following Sharp's trail. The sound design of this area is so eerie. You can hear the constant, unnerving screams of the inmates when that door first opens. And you're suddenly surrounded by this currently unknown ingredient in the recipe for disaster the Joker's cooking. It's one of the most butt-clenching moments in the game. You don't know what these people will do, they barely act like people. They're unpredictable and they don't seem to share attack patterns with your more normal enemies. Despite their inability to get you, you still feel attacked. You feel alone in here for what I would think is the first time. You kind of feel a bit powerless. There's so many of them and only one of you, and this was the first time in the game when I genuinely felt scared. The Scarecrow sections are cool spectacles, but they prey on Batman's fears, not yours. This, on the other hand, is primal fear. Surrounded by an unknown entity in a building you don't know, and you need to keep going deeper into this building to find Sharp. It's great. It's horrible, but it's great. As the trail keeps leading us further down the rabbit hole, we find Pamela Isley, aka Poison Ivy, locked in her own specialised cell. Surely she won't be an issue at any point, right? Batman tracks Sharp down and the door shuts behind him, locking him and Sharp in a control room. We cut to Harley Quinn meeting Poison Ivy, and the two debate whether Ivy should be released. Quinn gives in and lets her go, before the Joker then opens the doors to the lunatic cells, letting the most dangerous of the inmates on the island loose, making this whole building 1,000 times worse. Here's where we get access, though, to the cryptographic sequencer, a gadget which allows Batman to hack various consoles and doors throughout the asylum, and unlock otherwise inaccessible areas by hacking and overloading the security consoles. Batman escapes the room and tells Sharp to stay here and lock himself in so he'll be safe. In this room we can find Clayface, in his first Arkham appearance, who shifts between the forms of Gordon, Sharp and Cash. He doesn't do anything else here, but just the fact he's here is pretty cool, and it's a great way to introduce him. He'll even mimic their voices and have you second guessing who's who. But there's no time for that, as Batman begins chasing Harley Quinn through the penitentiary, and we get to fight the lunatic enemies. This enemy rarely appears in groups, and usually just attack as a singular entity. They're quicker than your average thug, and they scream at you, which is horrifying, but they trade speed for durability, because a well-placed batarang or a singular punch could take these poor deluded inmates down. Or you can wait for them to make the first move before countering and using a ground takedown. If you mistime this though, they'll mount your back and begin choking you out at a pretty quick rate, so they are dangerous. What makes them even more scary is that sometimes they just won't show up on your detective vision, so they can get the drop on you, and this adds a whole new fear factor to this section, because up until this point, you've been able to get the drop on enemies, not the other way around. This is completely uncharted territory. I wanted to talk about the inscriptions on the walls in the penitentiary. Now, bear in mind, this is where the worst of the worst are locked up. In fact, we can infer that Two-Face, Riddler, Calendar Man, Clayface, who we saw when rescuing Sharp, Prometheus, Mr. Freeze, Harley Quinn, Scarface, and presumably the Joker are all locked up here whenever they're taken into custody from the various Easter eggs and hint left around in the island. So keep that in mind, and please give me some slack when it comes to these pronunciations on the walls, because they're all in Latin. On the walls in the penitentiary there are various Latin quotes, which I'll read now. We have "Liberate me ex infernis," which translates to "Deliver me from hell", "Homo homini lupus," which translates to man is wolf", "Non compos mentis," which means of unsound mind, "Actus non facit reum nisi mens rea," which is the common law of criminal liability, or the act is not culpable if the mind is not guilty, and finally, "Mors certa horta incerta," which translates to "Death is certain, it's our uncertain." These different Latin quotes all point to the fact that the criminals locked up here are all the worst of the worst. Let's start with the first quote, "Liberate me ex infernis," which means "deliver me from hell." I think this could be here for one of two reasons. The quote is a reference to the fact that Jesus can save people from hell, and if we apply that to this universe, we can look at it at either Quincy Sharp sees himself as a god here, and he's trying to save these disciples from the hell of their own twisted minds, which makes sense if we follow the Chronicles of Arkham and his mindset. Or if we look at it from Batman's perspective, this could be in reference to the fact that tonight he's here to save the island from the badness that's taken over this night specifically. I think the first meaning makes more sense, but it's an open book. The second quote, homo homini lupus, meaning man to man is wolf, relates to man being its own worst enemy, and during times of stress or mental disarray, it's common for man to display inhuman qualities. The quote is pretty straightforward, and Sigmund Freud took this to believe that humans can reveal themselves to be savage beasts when the forces in the mind that normally inhibit them stop working, and philosopher Joseph de Maistre wrote that humans are capable of killing for many reasons, whether it be to clothe themselves, feed themselves, or just for amusement. This makes a lot of sense in the context of Arkham. The walls in the asylum seem to breed a fascination for death and the theatrical ways in which death can be inflicted. So, the fact people centuries ago were wise to the amusement of certain people killing is an interesting parallel to the fact that even now, people in this universe are still wise to this, and the inhumane actions people commit for fun. People like the Joker, who seem to get a kick out of death, whether it be others or even his own. The next two quotes are similar in meaning, so we'll bundle them together. Non compos mentis and actus non facit reum nisi mens rea, which both refer to the fact that crimes committed which aren't done with a sound mind can't be held against the person who committed it, which in the context of the Batman universe is an interesting philosophy, which applies to the real world much better than this. Take the Joker, for example. It's debated whether he's insane or super sane, and aware of the fact that he is who he is beyond the confines of his own world. But for argument's sake, we'll just go with insane. Does this mean he can't be held accountable for his countless murders? Well, again, that's up for debate, but it's an interesting take that in a world full of clinically insane supervillains, this logic is still applied to a certain degree, and it's a bit strange that people still follow this when you've got people like Victor Zsasz, the Joker, Professor Pig, Killer Croc, killing and maiming innocents basically on a weekly basis. The final quote, mors certa horta incerta, which translates to death is certain, its hour uncertain, is a bit of a wild card here. The rest of the quotes apply to the insanity that lurks within the walls of Arkham, but this one just straight up mentions the final chapter in even the most insane criminal's life, death. This is a stark contrast to the rest of the quotes, and I think more than any other of the inscribed quotes, this fits the asylum's reputation. The asylum's first patient was killed by its founder, its second died within its walls after creating it. After that, a slew of suicides, breakouts, murders. The asylum is death personified. It's where you either rot or you escape and murder again. It breeds this feeling of an inescapable death no matter how hard you try, and although you might try and escape it, it will get you eventually. And tonight, its final night in operation, the countless deaths add to its tally for one last goodbye. Batman keeps following Quinn and finds her swinging on a giant pendulum. A fight ensues with Quinn overlooking the proceedings before she gets away, flipping away, and the hunt continues before finding her in a control room, looking at two guards both hung over electrified water. Batman rescues them, and then Quinn sets a timer for a gas bomb, so we use the cryptographic sequencer and get out of there in the nick of time. And the wild goose chase to capture Harley Quinn continues. We chase Quinn to my personal favourite fight in the game. This fight, for some reason, has always stuck with me. It begins with a few thugs coming out, and it sticks with this for the duration of the fight, but what separates this from the pack is the added danger that one of these three floors will become electrified and the fight shifts to another floor. You can use this to your advantage though, by using the backlaw to pull enemies off the safety of the non-electrified floor onto the floor below if the floor in the middle is the danger zone. This fight's pretty cool, and it's very different from the usual combat section. We finish the fight and finally get our hands on Harley, who comes flipping out but gets one-tapped by Batman. Batman then finds a note on her, which is a guest list for the party later tonight, which includes some of the most famous and notorious Batman villains. But more importantly, the blabbermouth former psychiatrist reveals the secret labs in the garden to Batman, confirming what Dr. Young said before she died and giving Batman a way to find it: Harley Quinn's fingerprints. Harley is locked away and the hunt for the Joker's Titan lab begins. On the way out of the penitentiary, we can hear a radio report by Jack Ryder, who's keeping Gotham up to date on the night's proceedings, and he informs Gotham that Batman may be dead.
Jack, we're seeing that all access to the island has been restricted. Police and state troopers are manning checkpoints.
That's correct. The island is effectively cut off from the mainland. Nothing on or off. Early reports that Batman himself is on the island appear to be confirmed. Eyewitness reports state that he was returning the Joker to Arkham after the incident at the mayor's office. There are unconfirmed reports that Batman was killed during the Joker's daring escape. But I must stress, this is currently unconfirmed. More as it happens. Back to the studio.
Thank you, Jack. We'll bring you more as it happens. Has Jack...
This is a really small and completely inconsequential detail, but the level of world building it adds is so cool, and I can only imagine the fear that Gotham must feel, not knowing if the only man who can stop this madness is dead or alive. It's really cool and means that from the outside the breakout and situation must look much worse than it is on the inside, which is a terrifying thought. On our way to the gardens, we head into the visitor centre again. Joker is now stood up and talks to Batman about the Robins, who I believe at this point is Tim Drake, the third Robin. With Jason dead and Dick now being too old to be Nightwing, this means Death in the Family is also canon, meaning this Batman has been through Nightfall, Death in the Family, this game, and God knows what else up to this point. So if it wasn't obvious yet, this is probably the most veteran Batman we've seen in media thus far. We leave the visitor centre, and if we turn on detective mode, we can see the island is now covered in lunatics. They are everywhere, a constant threat and reminder of the lack of control the right people have over the island. It's becoming increasingly hard to argue against the haunted nature, or at least the unfortunate nature, of the island. Things just keep getting worse and worse. The Dark Knight seems to be the only shining beacon of hope, and so he tracks Quinn's fingerprints to the insides of the botanical gardens, as expected, and we enter the Madhouse's greenhouse. Upon entering the gardens, a wave of calm rushes over the player. The music that emanates from the speakers around the gardens is calm. It's almost a stark reminder that a calm atmosphere is possible while still remaining unnerving. I suppose the inmates of Arkham needed a place to rest every now and then, but the whole thing feels serene, like being in immense pain and then snap, gone. Just relief. At the same time, it's a little unnerving and unsettling to have come from an island ran by inmates and psychopaths, to now being stood in the lobby of a place where all those worries seem to be a part of a distant past. Rocksteady nailed the feeling of this place. The calmness doesn't last forever, but just exploring this area before we head any further in is so different. The atmosphere and overall feeling of the entire experience changes on a dime. It doesn't last forever, but then again, nothing does. But we do need to find that lab. Batman heads through the gardens and comes across some armed thugs who've taken over for the Joker. This section's pretty cool. It's a classic 3-tier Arkham stealth section, and it's pretty much what you'd expect, but the set design here is brilliant. The giant dome above you as you swing around the gargoyles is great and makes you feel like a bat in the rafters. The statue of Poseidon in the centre of the room's a cool touch, and I just think this whole section is about as underrated as they come in this game. We head through a door to the generator room because we've done this before. Okay, so here there are two paths. You can follow the fingerprints through to the electrical water room or go straight to the generator. Having played this game hundreds of times, I instinctively went through the door to bypass the electrical water. This changes dialogue between Batman and Joker, and even the dialogue Joker says over the tannoy. It doesn't affect anything apart from that, but for the sake of this, Batman's smart enough to know Joker would have rigged the water up to the electrical mains. Batman heads to the generator room, and after rescuing a doctor from a group of thugs, he uses the cryptographic sequencer to shut down the generator so he can get across the water. Leaving this room, we can find a bench dedicated to Thomas and Martha Wayne, benefactors of Arkham Asylum. It's interesting how much the Waynes are mentioned in this game, because they are mentioned quite a few times. It kind of puts into perspective the work they did and the work their son went on to do. Thomas and Martha used the exponential wealth they had to help the city, the asylum, and the people of Gotham. But Bruce uses their wealth to aid his crusade as Batman. It's debatable which is a more effective way of spending the money and the time, but in the end it goes to show how one way or another, the Waynes are more ingrained in the asylum than most would believe. We end up finding Joker, but he runs and blows the ceiling down behind him, forcing Batman into a vent, and ultimately the abandoned chamber. This area is absolutely packed with atmosphere. First of all, you can hear the Joker experimenting on inmates and the pain they go through while going through twisted experiments. The level design here is typical Arkham Asylum platforming, and it's great because there's plenty of ways to go which aren't the intended route. My favourite being that if you climb on top of the waterfall, a thug's contorted body will fall through the pipe above. His arm's all messed up along with some other deformities, and this is a great way of showing the Joker's complete disregard for human life, even his own men's. Metaphorically and, again, literally, throws a man into the sewers. Like, he literally flushes him down the toilet like a piece of shit. It's really weird and dark, and it fits this world so well. It's great, this section's great. Although really short, it's one of my favourites in the game, and one of the most atmospheric places in the game. After navigating the chamber and coming out on the other side, Batman rescues a doctor from a couple of thugs. The doctor tells Batman about the doctors being held in the Aviary. On the way to the Aviary, there's a bench we can find. The bench has a headless statue cowering over it, and the bench's plaque reads, "Constance Arkham, my dear wife, the First Lady of Arkham," and etched over it, "Mad Dog." This is arguably one of the darkest things in this game given the context. Mad Dog's influence over the asylum has stretched this far, to the point where you've got people recreating the murder of Amadeus' wife all these years later using a dedicated statue and bench. Like, just think about that. That's absolutely disgusting and really cool in terms of making fans go, oh, yeah, this is bad. There is a possibility Mad Dog inscribed this himself, but he was around a century before we show up. It's unlikely they would have left this defacement on the plaque, but then again, given the standards of the rest of the asylum, it's very possible. Batman carries on to the Aviary and finds a hostage situation similar to the Gordon one earlier. If Batman is seen, the hostages will be dropped like a sack of puppies into the seemingly never-ending pool of darkness. Batman saves the hostages after taking down the controller first, and one of the doctors mentions the secret lab. Batman tracks Quinn's fingerprints and finds another control box to use the cryptographic sequencer on. I should have mentioned this earlier, but now the Joker has begun attaching gas canisters to the side of cryptographic sequencer boxes, so if Batman doesn't do 3 of these hacks in time, he gets gassed and killed. He succeeds here, however, and enters the lab to find Joker, fronted by 2 of his men who he promptly shoots with the Titan formula. Giving us our first double Titan thug fight. In the background, before Joker escapes, we can see boxes wrapped up. These are batches of Titan Joker's shipping to various characters in the Batman universe. In the original 2009 release, these were labelled to go to Catwoman and Two-Face. God knows what Catwoman and Two-Face would do with Titan. But in the Return to Arkham release, these were all addressed to the Penguin, to justify him having Titan in Arkham City. A nice little change that, although I'm sure no one really noticed initially, shows the level of attention Rocksteady put into these games. The double Titan thug fight's an interesting one. It's the same as one Titan, but doubled. You can also ride the Titans and get them to hit each other, which is a fun little addition. After defeating the 2 Titans and destroying Joker's labs, things aren't all over, because Joker escaped with enough Titan to enact his plan if he gets out. Batman calls in the Batwing and gets his hand on a new gadget, the Line Launcher. A way of covering large areas quickly by firing a line behind and in front of the user and propelling them along. It's like a zip line without you actually having to do anything. We use the new gadget to cover the black hole and leave the lab, and as we head back out of the Aviary, we can see the doctors we rescued have been killed. Another merciless display of brutality, making the Dark Knight's efforts in saving them futile. We begin tracking Poison Ivy, whose plants may be able to nullify the Titan strain used by Joker. We manage to track Ivy using pheromones in the air, and find her in the garden's main garden. Batman lays out the plan to her, but Ivy's not convinced until Batman tells Ivy that if she doesn't help, every plant on the island will die. Ivy probably doesn't agree that this will happen, but she reluctantly agrees and tells Batman the only plant that can reverse the effects of Titan are on this island. Great. The only issue, it's in Killer Croc's lair. Not so great. Batman leaves and tells Ivy that if she doesn't go back to her cell, he'll be back for her next, and begins heading to the Arkham Mansion to find Aaron Cash, to find out where the entrance to Croc's lair is. On the way out of the gardens, we can hear Joker give Ivy some Titan. The ground begins shaking, so Joker gives her some more, sending her plants into overdrive, and turning the island into an extension of the Botanical Gardens, until Batman can figure out a way to cure her. The island is now completely changed. The whole place is now covered in Titan-enhanced plants, bigger and stronger than their usual counterparts, and wrapping the island in a floral arrangement the likes of which haven't been seen before. Batman makes his way out of the front door and comes across the newest type of enemy in the game, the Spore Plant. These stationary enemies fire spores at any surrounding person, taking huge amounts of health off them, and in the cases of weaker enemies like the lunatics, straight out killing them. These plants are some of the more dangerous enemies in the game due to their randomness. Sometimes they'll attack on sight, other times they'll wait for you to make a move. The only certainty is that they're going to attack one way or another, so to deal with them the player can run up to them and destroy them before they have a chance to do anything, or wait for them to attack, destroy their projectiles using a batarang, and then destroy them. Batman heads over to the mansion and finds it's covered in plants, and this seemingly poisonous pink mist. The player has to use their new toy, namely the line launcher, to navigate the top of the mansion to get to Cash. What I love about this section of the game is, although on the surface it's a lot of backtracking, everything feels new. The whole island has changed since the last time we were here, whether it be from plants or the inmates. Something has changed everywhere we go. It's really cool to have this chance to revisit these previously explored locations with a different perspective and style. And I think this game does the usually hated backtracking cliche really well. It feels fresh at all times. Aaron Cash tells us that the entrance to Croc's lair is actually in the bottom of intensive treatment, so we're going back to where it began. Batman heads to intensive treatment and finds that it's been locked down, but a sniper-wielding guard reveals a moment of weakness, and Batman exploits it, breaking into the building and beginning the descent down to Croc's lair. Here we come across arguably the hardest stealth section in the game, which fittingly takes place in the room we had our first actual stealth section. This time thugs have rigged the gargoyles to blow if Batman uses them, as this poor guy found out the hard way.
No! No, I'm still up!
Taking away a vital crutch the player has probably lent on for their entire playthrough. I really like this change in dynamics. It makes you feel like you're being robbed out of your safety blanket. You have to adapt and utilise the environment to its limits. This isn't a safe place for the Dark Knight anymore. The hunter versus hunted dynamic has been flipped again. Not a complete 180, but still, it's never been harder for the Dark Knight to survey his prey. It's not impossible, as these henchmen will come to find out. Batman heads down the corridor to the door to Croc's lair. Batman Arkham Asylum begins as it means to go on. The sky flashes and is suddenly filled with the only real symbol of fear Gotham has ever known, while the streets are filled with chaos and the aftermath of said chaos. The Batmobile roars through the street, through the concrete jungle like a panther chasing its prey to its inevitable end. The Batman, beaten, rides shotgun in the car, its driver as insane and as hell-bent on chaos as ever. Signs warn of an escaping inmate from their destination. A serious house on a serious earth. A place the worst of the worst go to rot, and our home for the next 8 hours of gameplay. As the Batmobile rushes towards the monolithic main tower of the asylum, we see it. Arkham Asylum. Joker straps the clinically insane Batman to a gurney and begins the slow, methodical walk through the asylum. His allies almost giddy to see him. They're as bad as he is at this point. Gordon, Cash, Dr. Young, they're all insane, the worst of the worst. The walk comes to an end when the resident psychiatrist Jonathan Crane observes that Batman is as far gone as he's ever been. A twisted shell of a man, non compos mentis, as the inscriptions on the wall read. Joker decides to put an end to this before it even begins.
The party with a bang.
Batman wakes up in a grave and bursts out from the ground below, back in the old familiar. The old asylum walls, for the third time tonight, are housed within the Dark Knight's brain as he fights his way through the fear and blasts Scarecrow once again with his bat symbol. Scarface can be heard making jokes and commentary over the TVs, a nice humorous break from the fear-induced mental coma we're in at the moment. We end up fighting more of Scarecrow's skeleton army. He has a trick up his sleeve though, a Titan thug. Well, more like 2 of them. Batman fights through 3 rounds of Scarecrow's thugs, getting harder and harder each time. And after each round, he turns a bat symbol into Crane until all 3 have pierced him, before Batman's able to break out of the nightmare with Scarecrow asking him what he is. He's ingested enough fear toxin at this point to drive 10 men insane, yet he's still there. Scarecrow makes a break for it and Batman follows. This entire section is the creme de la creme of the Scarecrow segment. It's the only one which I think struck genuine fear into the players and Batman alike. The screen freezing and then putting you back at square one, or what seems to be square one, is just amazing. Whoever idea this was deserved some sort of raise. The preceding role reversal opening scene is great as well. Seeing that the inmates actually do run the madhouse this time is pretty cool, and we actually get to see Scarecrow do his normal job, which is something I suppose. I also think there's a lot to be said for what the villains say about Batman. There's always been a huge point of contention regarding Bruce Wayne's sanity, and this game along with Serious House both tackle that head on, especially in this section. They both look at Batman objectively, as a man whose parents were gunned down in front of him, and even 3 decades later, he never quite got over that loss. That awful, awful night that ultimately changed his life forever stuck with him. It's clear Batman isn't fully sane. He may mask it behind all the training, but there's no way a man who fights crime in a bat-based combat armor shell is completely sane. He can't be. And the things he's seen, done, people he's lost, and the criminals he's inadvertently birthed all must contribute to his declining mental state. It really feeds into the idea that Batman and Joker are 2 sides of the same coin. Both had one bad day. One took the path of the hero, and the Joker shows his path. It's what makes their dynamic so intriguing. It's the backbone of all of Batman's stories with the Joker, and what has allowed him to not only endure, but thrive even all these decades later. Back in intensive treatment, and Batman heads down further into the building, chasing Crane and the only hope of finding a way to stop the Joker. Down here we can actually find Crane's base of operations, a small cave near Croc's lair in the elevator shaft. God knows how he got in here, but it's a nice little touch. Batman heads into the sewers and catches up to Scarecrow, who threatens to drop his fear toxin into the water, flooding the catacombs with fear toxin, and all but ending any hope of Batman ever finding the plant he needs. But, just in the nick of time, Killer Croc hears the commotion, snatches Crane as Batman throws a batarang at his electrified collar before he dives into the water below with Crane in his grasp. Batman now knows one weakness of Croc. He'll never beat him in a one-on-one fight. Croc's too big, too powerful. But a well-placed batarang to the collar can send Wayland packing, a helpful bit of knowledge that will come in handy in the coming few minutes. Batman heads into Croc's lair. He asks Oracle for the schematics of the maze-like layout, but the area isn't even on the official records. He's heading into no man's land. Batman places a tracking device at the front door and leaves a nice bat-shaped explosive gel arrangement on the weak floor, in case Croc tries to follow him on the way out. And then, he heads into Croc's domain. This is probably up there as scared as I've ever been when playing a game. I'm not kidding either, I'm not a huge horror game fan, so this is probably about as close I've ever been to being genuinely terrified. Even all these years later, I still tackle this section like it's the first time, not knowing when or where Croc pops up as you make noise and as the music ramps up is just amazing. It's genuinely scary because for only about the 4th time in the game, Batman is the prey here. He's the catch of the day, and that's jarring because you spend all this time as being the threat in the room, and now suddenly his enemies aren't locked in there with him, he's locked in there with the enemy. And all you have to protect yourself with is a batarang and your wits. It's terrifying, and the maze-like layout of the lair is genuinely disorientating at points. It's not fun, and if you're too loud and the noise wavelengths hit a certain point, say hello to Croc because he doesn't hold back. He'll bring you down with him if it's the last thing he does.
Oracle, I'm getting out of here.
What about Croc?
He won't be a problem.
After collecting all of the spores from the various plants around the lair and making his way back to the entrance, and by that I mean he's chased down back to the entrance of Croc's lair by a fed-up Killer Croc who just wants Batman dead, but thanks to his prior preparation, he's able to dispatch of Jones by dropping him into Arkham's seemingly endless abyss. Batman says he has to head back to the Batcave at Deadman's Point to synthesize a cure for the Titan. On the way back to the Batcave, we can see that Ivy's plants are everywhere, especially the spore spewers, which are now covering the island. It's becoming a big issue. Traversal's actually pretty hard now, balancing the ever-present threat of whether to be attacked or attack first when it comes to the plants. Batman makes it back to the cave though and mixes a cure. A small batch, but enough to neutralise what's left on Arkham Island, which for now we'll have to do. As Batman mixes the batch, Ivy's plants come crashing through the cave, rendering the Batcave completely useless. Batman gets up from the abyss he nearly fell down and grabs our final gadget, and arguably one of the more overpowered ones, and by arguably I mean you'd be arguing with a brick wall because this is the most overpowered gadget probably ever. It's the Ultra Batclaw, or the Triple Batclaw. This thing is a beast. You can clear Predator rooms with it, pull grates off the wall in the blink of an eye, and even pull down explosive gel walls. We'd usually have to spray explosive gel on these, but with this, you can just break it off. It's amazing. We then get this really cool parkour section around Deadman's Point. Gliding, using the line launcher, and grappling our way out of Deadman's Point, as the city in the background lights the way in one of the most atmospheric points in the game. There's no thugs, there's no explosions, no threat, just you, Batman, and the city lighting your way back into the madhouse. It's really well crafted, and takes some skill to get through. On our way back to the surface, and on our mission to find Ivy again, we go back through the sewer junction, where Oracle tells us the whole thing kind of acts as a kind of natural waste disposal, and Joker's just dumped all of his excess formula, failed experiments, and basically all of his trash in here, meaning that when the sewer junction fills up, the Titan will enter the Gotham water supply, and the results, as you can probably imagine, could be pretty catastrophic. I just wanted to talk about the dynamic between Oracle and Batman in this game while we have a kind of minute spare as we scale this monolithic structure. The dynamic here is really cool. It brings this sort of casual and almost funny side out of Batman, which we barely ever see in these games. It's really fun to listen to them talking about the night's proceedings and then just on a dime switch into like mission mode when it calls for it. I really like it, and I'm glad she appeared in the rest of the games, because this dynamic is really fun, and it kind of comes to a head in Batman Arkham Knight. Batman heads to the top of the junction, and goes after the water pumps to stop them from pumping so the Titan never reaches Gotham. Joker becomes aware of this, and has his thugs waiting to protect the pumps. The first two pumps are pretty easy to stop. A few thugs guard it, but it's nothing too serious. Batman uses the cryptographic sequencer to shut them down and heads after the third pump, which is one of the most unique Predator encounters in the game. It has this really claustrophobic feel to it, and is really different in terms of layout to the rest of the maps. It still keeps its 3-layer setup the other Predator maps do, but to a much lesser extent. But overall, it feels more kind of elongated and at the same time smaller. It's a weird section, but to me it's one of the more memorable Predator segments in the game. After shutting down the final water pump and stopping the infected water from ever reaching Gotham, the Dark Knight heads back the way he came to go and find Poison Ivy and put an end to her plans. But on the way, he's trapped in a small room, and Joker tells us he knows what we're doing and he's going to send down a token of his displeasure.
Sending down a token of my displeasure. Of course, I hope it doesn't hurt you too badly.
Which turns out to be a Titan thug and a slew of his other thugs. This fight is really cool. It gets crowded really quickly, and the Titan thug charging at you in such confined space is quite challenging if you're not on your A-game. After dispatching of the thugs though, we head back out onto the surface, and after Ivy. Ivy's plants are still growing and still expanding, and we even hear that they've now reached the Gotham Bay. So we head straight to the botanical garden and find that the whole thing has been quite literally grown out of proportion. And on the way, Joker doesn't do his usual commentary of what's just been going on, instead making a joke about cutting a doctor's legs off. It's quite funny actually, it's Joker. Entering the gardens, and we head back to the room we found Ivy in. And on the way there, we come across the guard we rescued back when we found Frank Bowles dead, now under Ivy's influence. We fight him and another guard and enter Ivy's lair. The Titan has completely sent her insane, and she grows a huge plant out of the ground, and we get the Poison Ivy boss fight. It has 4 different facets to it. Throwing batarangs to chip her health down and timing them right so when her guard's down we can deal big damage. The plants growing out of the ground which, if you're caught in them, will grab you and choke you out. The mind-controlled guard she sends after us, and the spores Ivy will throw at you. The combined threat of the quadrilogy of plant-based danger means we have to be on our A-game. She also has 2 health bars before the end of the fight, meaning that we have to deal with all of this twice. It's a really cool set piece and definitely one of the better Arkham boss fights overall. It's fitting, fun, and keeps the atmosphere of the island at its core, even with the more fantastical elements at play here. After doing enough damage to Ivy, we can administer a cure and blow her to Kingdom Come with the explosive gel, as the plants around us scream in pain and Ivy disappears down below. The garden begins crumbling due to the strain of the plants dying, so Batman manages to find a spot to grapple up to and out of the gardens, and ends up on a roof in Arkham West. As fireworks fill the sky and Joker finally invites us to the big party. A little fact before we get into the finale, Batman's stubble grows out as the night goes on. It's barely noticeable fact, but it does grow and it makes him look about as dishevelled as he probably feels at this point. As music fills the air and fireworks light the way, Batman heads to the now completely transformed visitor centre in hopes of ending this once and for all, accepting the Joker's invite. Upon arriving, a thug will ask Batman to stop and see if he's on the guest list of the party, and after some checking, thankfully, it turns out he is. In fact, he's the only name on the list. The thugs wearing party hats won't actually attack you unless you attack them first, but we have to remember these guys are criminals, and so we have to deal justice to them. But when we go along the red carpet and into the Joker's visitor centre for the final time, Joker reveals himself to us as the Joker sat in the chair at the end of the hall we've been talking to this whole time. Whether or not this has always been the real Joker is up for debate since we can't use detective mode in these segments, but he's real this time and that's what matters.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1! Why didn't you stop Batman? Me? It was your plan, you goofy clown. I'm sending you back to the ventriloquist where you belong. You had to spoil everything, didn't you? Beating up Bane, feeding Scarecrow to Croc, slapping around Harley, my hobby, by the way, and ruining all my lovely Venom plans.
It's over, Joker.
Over? Why, my dear delusional Dark Knight, it hasn't even begun.
Joker sends 2 Titan thugs after us, this time both ex-Arkham guards. This plays out similarly to the fight in the secret lab, but this time with the added threat of normal thugs. But we get through them pretty easily, and it's at this point the Joker reveals he has Commissioner Gordon hostage, who Batman thought had left the island after the Bane fight. Joker tries to shoot Gordon with a Titan dart, but Batman intercepts it and saves his friend, and manages to resist the change of the Titan. Joker begins to monologue about how angry he is Batman ruined his night, and he won't even do him the courtesy of changing into a Titan-enhanced monster. He's denied him of all of his plans, months of them, down the drain. He says all of this before shooting himself in the jaw with the Titan formula, taking us to the final showdown between Batman and the Joker.
So, you want to play hardball, bats, do you? Your call. Pickle, pickle. No! Oh, you're ruining my big night! Months of planning down the crapper. I just wanted to bring down your grim facade and for once let you see the world as I see it, giggling in a corner and bleeding. But you've denied me even that. I have nothing to live for.
Arkham Asylum remains under lockdown, its staff at the mercy of the rampaging inmates. Just 10 minutes ago, we received this taped message.
Greetings, Gotham! Joker here! Arkham is mine! Soon I'll unleash madness untold onto the streets of Gotham. But first, direct your eyes to the rooftops and witness the final destruction of your dear Dark Knight.
We've been circling the tower since the... Wait! There! Joker's making his move!
Well, here we are, the final fight. This fight is the centre of a lot of contention. Is it good? Is it bad? Who cares? We're here. To beat the Joker and save Gordon and the rest of the island, we need to keep away from the giant explosive teeth, fight his thugs off, and pounce on his showmanship by pulling him down from the roof of the visit centre whenever he decides to gloat to the cameras. We use the Ultra Batclaw to do this, and after pulling him down we can land a few strikes before he gets up and begins flailing his arms at us. This is pretty easily dodged, and we repeat this process 3 times before the finale. This boss fight feels... off. The rest of the fights have always kept the core atmosphere of the game at their heart. Bane's boss fight felt dark and gritty. Scarecrow wrote the book on great Arkham boss encounters. Croc feasted on the idea of scaring you out of your boots. And even Ivy, despite the departure from the typically grounded feel of the fight, keeps that dark and dirty Arkham atmosphere. But Joker? He should feel special, but he doesn't feel like a boss. He feels like a mini-boss. You don't fight Joker, you fight his minions. And although Joker obviously isn't supposed to be an overly physical threat to Batman, and this was probably the best way to get him above Batman's power level, it's wasted, because you never really go one-on-one with him, and it feels pretty lackluster. That, after all of this, makes this game end on such a flat note. That's not to take away from the set design though. The fight takes place on top of the visitor centre in a thrown-together gladiator arena. These are two gladiators fighting to the death to prove who's better. It's got a good feel to it in that sense, but it lacks in nearly every other part, and mechanically speaking, it's one of the most lacklustre fights in the game, carried by its stakes and placement in the story. Alas, through all of this criticism and through the slew of bad comments made against it over the years, Batman pulls the Joker down one final time.
I can take it. I can take anything you throw at me, Bats. You can't beat me. I'm actually going to win. Ready for the next round?
Always.
What?
I'll never let you win. Never.
Batman won. Against all the odds, he took Joker down, with one explosive punch to the jaw. One big bang, and the night was over. All that insanity brought to a swift and decisive end. Joker is knocked out, and Batman stands victorious when it's all said and done. Guards and the GCPD rush to get the asylum back to working order. The super criminals are locked up, and Titan thugs return to normal. Well, as normal as some of them can go back to being. Gordon is saved and asks Batman if he needs a ride back to Gotham, given that his car is in the bottom of the bay. But as he extends the offer, a report of Two-Face robbing a bank comes over the radio, and the two exchange one final glance before Batman heads into Gotham in the Batwing. Crime seemingly never sleeps, but neither does the Batman. After the credits roll, we have one of three endings. One makes more sense canonically, but either Scarecrow, Bane, or Killer Croc can come up from the water and grab a crate of Titan, setting up the next story. Canonically, Bane is the correct one to grab it, but nonetheless, the ending leaves us looking forward to Batman's return. Batman Arkham Asylum was a triumph. Its mixture of revolutionary features, its handcrafted island full of atmospheric inclusions, and the story which takes inspirations from some of the Dark Knight's best outings, all came together in a perfect blend. Free-flow combat, simplicity and depth changed the gaming landscape as we know it. Its easy to understand but hard to master approach to fighting is something which has ripples still affecting games to this day. It was good enough to remain largely unchanged for Rocksteady's next three outings with the Dark Knight, with the studio merely refining it for the upcoming sequels. The stealth, although not perfect, is a real Batman simulator. You feel like a predator in a jungle of prey. Arkham's map, although going through huge changes in development, turned out in a way where every part felt unique, yet still connected in its own way. The underlying eeriness of the island, helped along by the source material it borrowed so heavily from, allowed and still allows Arkham Island to be one of the most atmospheric and unnerving places in gaming, and definitely the most atmospheric and unnerving map we've seen in a Batman game to date. It borders on being a horror game a lot throughout its runtime, and I think this really is a lightning in a bottle moment. We'll likely never see anything like this again. Its unmatched creepiness and all-encompassing nature allows the walls of the asylum to feel like they're closing in on you at all times, never quite reaching you, but there's a constant reminder of where you are in the back of your head. The character designs here are perfect as well. From Batman's lean and striking design, to Joker's animated series-inspired look, to Croc's best design thus far, Quinn's now iconic nurse outfit. They all stick out, and that's something Arkham would become known for. Taking these beloved designs, giving them the voice actors to match, and then creating some of the best iterations of these characters ever. Conroy and Hamill's dynamic on screen is as good as ever, and they never seem to miss a beat here. They feel ripped straight out of the minds of the creators and planted on our screens. They're perfect here, and I think this gives Arkham Asylum that extra sprinkle of legitimacy that, at the time back in 2009, it so sorely needed after years of flops in the gaming scene. Batman Arkham Asylum may no longer be the best Batman game, and it's certainly not the biggest, but by God it has the most heart. Its consistency and dedication to keeping within the predefined lore of these beloved characters, but branching out far enough to the point of feeling unique, is something that should be praised. It's unique, and it spawned a whole generation of Batman fans, including me. I love this game, its flaws, its perfections, and the atmosphere that to this day scares the crap out of me. Arkham Asylum spawned a whole slew of AAA action-adventure games. Its presence is felt in every like-minded game you pick up today, and its influence is undeniable. And although others would later go on to do it better or for a prolonged period of time, Rocksteady Studios laid Arkham Asylum's foundations down in 2009, and since then, superhero games have not looked back. Arkham City, Knight, Origins, Spider-Man PS4, Spider-Man 2, Miles Morales, none of them would be as good as they were had it not been for Asylum's initial leap of faith to try something new. It always felt for a long while that superhero games knew their limits and knew not to exceed them. But not Arkham Asylum, it couldn't afford to know its limits. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, and goodbye. Parting is such a sweet sorrow, dearest. Still, you can't say we didn't show you a good time. Enjoy yourself out there, in the asylum. Just don't forget, if it ever gets too tough, there's always a place for you here.